Every neighborhood has one. The self-appointed ruler of suburban law and order. The woman who patrols the streets with a clipboard in one hand and a superiority complex in the other. She knows the HOA bylaws better than the lawyers who wrote them. She has the phone numbers of every code enforcement officer in the county memorized. And she has made it her personal mission in life to ensure that no lawn is too long, no mailbox too crooked, and no fence too boring. Her name was Helen Whitmore. She was 62 years old, wore pearl earrings even to check her mail, and had been the president of the Fairbrook Estates Homeowners Association for 11 consecutive years. She was the reason the neighborhood had no trampolines, no RV parking, and no visible trash cans. She was the reason that every lawn on Elm Street looked exactly the same, a sea of monotonous, manicured mediocrity that could have been stamped out of a mold. And she was about to meet her match. His name was Leo Vasquez. To the residents of Fairbrook Estates, he was a quiet, unassuming man in his late 30s who kept to himself. He lived in the modest 3-bedroom house at the end of the cul-de-sac. He had a kind smile, a friendly wave, and a reputation for being the kind of neighbor who would help you jumpstart your car at 7 in the morning without complaint. What his neighbors didn't know was that Leo Vasquez had painted the murals on the walls of the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. He had designed the massive installation that covered the entire east face of the Los Angeles Convention Center. His work had been featured in galleries from Paris to Tokyo, and the art world whispered his name with reverence. But that was just his day job. Because Leo Vasquez was also the artist known only as Spectre, the most elusive and celebrated graffiti artist in the country. His murals appeared overnight on water towers, bridge supports, and abandoned factories. They were breathtaking, politically charged, and technically masterful. The art community idolized him. The police had a file so thick it could stop a bullet. And no one, absolutely no one, knew his true identity. Not his co-workers. Not his friends. And certainly not the petty tyrant with the clipboard who thought she could dictate what was art and what wasn't. This is the story of how Helen Whitmore learned that when you try to force an artist to comply with your vision, you'd better be prepared for what he paints in return. Let me paint you a picture. Fairbrook Estates was the kind of neighborhood that real estate agents described as picture-perfect and family-friendly. It was nestled in the rolling hills just outside the city, with tree-lined streets, good schools, and a homeowners association so strict it made the Soviet bureaucracy look like a hippie commune. The houses were all variations on the same theme. 2-story colonials with white siding, black shutters, and manicured front lawns that looked like they'd been measured with a ruler. The driveways were clean. The mailboxes were uniform. The trash cans were hidden behind tasteful wooden enclosures that Helen had personally approved. And the fences, oh, the fences. They were all the same too. 6-foot-tall white vinyl panels that stretched in perfectly straight lines between identical houses. They were functional, yes. They provided privacy, sure. But they were also so profoundly, soul-crushingly dull that walking past them felt like watching paint dry. Leo had lived on Elm Street for 4 years. In that time, he had watched his neighbors come and go, watched the children grow up and the old people fade away. He had attended block parties where he made polite conversation about weather and property taxes. He had smiled and waved and been the perfect, forgettable neighbor. And every single day, he had walked past that blank white, hideously boring fence and wanted to scream. You see, Leo was an artist. And artists don't see the world the way other people do. When Leo looked at that fence, he didn't see a practical barrier between properties. He saw a blank canvas. A canvas that was just begging to be filled with color, with life, with meaning. A canvas that was screaming to be transformed from a symbol of suburban conformity into something beautiful. But Leo was patient. He had learned long ago that the best art takes time. So he waited. He planned. He dreamed. And Helen Whitmore had no idea what was coming. Let's talk about Helen. Helen Whitmore had been the president of the Fairbrook Estates HOA for 11 years. She had been elected on a platform of maintaining community standards, and had never looked back. She ran the HOA like a personal fiefdom, ruling with an iron fist and a copy of the bylaws that she had memorized cover to cover. She had a list of violations longer than her arm. She had written more fines than the local traffic court. She had been the subject of 3 separate restraining orders, and had proudly considered each one a badge of honor. Her method was simple. She walked the neighborhood every morning at precisely 8:15 a.m., her clipboard in hand, her sensible walking shoes slapping against the pavement. She would stop, take notes, and photograph anything that violated the arcane and ever-expanding list of HOA regulations. A lawn that was 2 inches too long? Fine. A mailbox that was the wrong shade of white? Fine. A child's bicycle left in the driveway? Fine. A garbage can visible from the street for more than 30 minutes after pickup? Oh, that would cost you. Helen didn't just enforce the rules. She reveled in them. She delighted in the power. She lived for the moment when a trembling neighbor would open their door to find her standing there, clipboard ready, a smug smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "You're in violation," she would say, and it was the highlight of her day. The neighborhood hated her. They hated her with a passion that was almost religious. But they were also afraid of her. Afraid of her fines. Afraid of her power. Afraid of the fact that she could make their lives a living hell if they crossed her. So they complied. They mowed their lawns. They painted their mailboxes. They hid their trash cans. They lived in fear of the woman with the clipboard. All except Leo. Leo didn't fear Helen. Leo found her deeply, profoundly pathetic. He would watch her patrol the streets from his front window, a cup of coffee in his hand, and he would marvel at the sheer smallness of it all. Here was a woman who could have accomplished anything with her life, and she had chosen to be the enforcer of suburban mediocrity. It was almost tragic. Almost. It started, as these things often do, with something small. Leo had been planning a project. A big project. He had spent the past 6 months designing a mural for the side of his garage, the part that faced the street, the part that Helen could see from her daily patrol route. It would be stunning. A sprawling depiction of a phoenix rising from flames, rendered in bold reds and oranges and golds. It would transform the mundane side of his house into a piece of art that would make people stop and stare. He had the permits. He had the materials. He had even run a preliminary color test on a small section of the wall, just to see how the paint would take in the afternoon light. It was beautiful. Even in its half-finished state, it was beautiful. And then Helen saw it. She came marching down the street at 8:15 a.m. on a Tuesday, her sensible shoes slapping against the pavement, her clipboard clutched to her chest like a holy relic. She stopped in front of Leo's house. She stared at the wall. She took out her phone and snapped a photograph. Leo watched from his window, sipping his coffee. He knew what was coming. He had known it from the moment he started the project. But he had also known that he was within his rights. He had the permits. He had the approval. He had dotted every I and crossed every T. Helen knocked on his door. When he opened it, she was standing there with her clipboard and her smug smile. "Mr. Vasquez," she said, and it wasn't a greeting. It was an accusation. "Helen," he replied, his voice perfectly neutral. "What can I do for you?" She gestured toward the garage wall with her pen. "That mess. What is it supposed to be?" Leo felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice calm. "It's a mural. I have all the permits. It's fully within HOA guidelines." Helen's smile widened. "Actually, Mr. Vasquez, I've reviewed the guidelines, and I'm afraid I have to disagree. Your art is a violation of Section 4, subsection B, paragraph 12 of the Fairbrook Estates HOA covenant. All exterior surfaces visible from the street must maintain a neutral, aesthetically pleasing appearance consistent with the overall character of the neighborhood." Leo raised an eyebrow. "My mural is aesthetically pleasing." "It's art." "Oh, Mr. Vasquez," Helen said, shaking her head with theatrical sadness. "This is not art. This is... I don't know what this is. It's an eyesore. It's tacky. It's frankly embarrassing for the neighborhood. And if you don't remove it, I'll be forced to escalate." She didn't wait for a response. She turned on her heel and marched away, her clipboard pressed against her chest like a shield. Leo stood in his doorway, watching her go. He felt the familiar stirring of fury that always came when someone dismissed art, real art, as mere decoration. But he also felt something else. Something that he hadn't felt in a long time. Inspiration. The letters started arriving the next week. They came in official-looking envelopes, stamped with the HOA logo and filled with legal jargon that translated to, "We hate your mural. Remove it or else." Leo read each one carefully, then filed it away in a folder he had started specifically for this purpose. He wasn't going to fight Helen. He knew better than that. Fighting a Karen, a real professional Karen, was like wrestling a pig in the mud. You just got dirty, and the pig liked it. No, Leo was going to do something far more effective. Something that would make Helen wish she had never laid eyes on his property. He was going to give her exactly what she asked for. The first thing he did was call the HOA office. Not to complain, but to confirm something. He asked them to read him the exact text of the rule Helen had cited. Section 4, subsection B, paragraph 12. They read it, and Leo smiled. Maintain a neutral, aesthetically pleasing appearance consistent with the overall character of the neighborhood. That was it. That was the rule that Helen had used to shut down his Phoenix mural. But here was the thing. The rule was so vague, so utterly nonspecific, that it could be interpreted to mean almost anything. What was neutral? What was aesthetically pleasing? What was consistent with the overall character of the neighborhood? Helen had been using that vagueness as a weapon for years, interpreting the rules however she wanted to get the results she wanted. But that sword cut both ways. And Leo was about to become a master swordsman. He spent the next week in his studio, working on a new design. He didn't just want to defy Helen. He wanted to humiliate her. He wanted to force her to look at something she hated every single day, knowing that there was nothing, absolutely nothing, she could do about it. The design was brilliant. It was a portrait. A massive, hyper-realistic portrait of Helen Whitmore herself, staring out from the side of his garage with her clipboard and her smug smile. But it wasn't just any portrait. It was a portrait that made her look exactly as she was, a petty, miserable, power-hungry tyrant. He captured every detail, the pearl earrings, the sensible shoes, the authoritarian tilt of her head. He painted her with the kind of brutal, unflinching honesty that only the best artists can achieve. And then, because he was a true professional, he painted a subtitle underneath the image in tasteful, elegant lettering. Helen Whitmore, keeper of suburban mediocrity. He finished the mural in 3 days. When it was done, he stood back and admired his work. It was possibly the best portrait he had ever painted. It was technically flawless, emotionally devastating, and deeply, deeply insulting. And it was perfectly, devastatingly legal. The painting went viral almost immediately. Within hours of Leo completing the mural, his neighbor across the street posted a photo on Facebook with the caption, "My neighbor just painted the HOA president. I'm dying." Within days, the photo had been shared tens of thousands of times. The local news picked it up. Then the national news. Then international news outlets. Suburban artist takes revenge on HOA Karen with epic mural, was the headline on the Washington Post. This homeowner painted his HOA president on his garage, and it's absolutely savage, was the Daily Mail. Artist's revenge mural goes viral after HOA president calls his work tacky, was BuzzFeed. And Helen. Helen was not pleased. She came marching down the street at 8:15 a.m., clipboard in hand, her face contorted with fury. She stood in front of Leo's garage, staring at her own painted face, and Leo could have sworn he saw steam coming out of her ears. "This," she sputtered. This is art," Leo offered, leaning against his front door with a cup of coffee in his hand. "This is a violation," she shrieked. "This is slander. This is. Leo sipped his coffee calmly. "Helen, I painted a portrait of you. A very accurate portrait, I might add. Do you see any lies here? Is it not true that you're the president of the HOA? Is it not true that you patrol the neighborhood with a clipboard?" Helen's face went red, then purple, then a shade of red that Leo had only ever seen in paint samples. "I'll have you fined," she shrieked. "I'll have you sued. I'll." I don't think you can do that, Leo said mildly. Section 4, subsection B, paragraph 12 says I have to maintain a neutral, aesthetically pleasing appearance consistent with the overall character of the neighborhood. I'd argue that a portrait of the neighborhood's most prominent figure is entirely consistent with the character of the neighborhood. And it's certainly aesthetically pleasing. I'm quite proud of it, actually. Helen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She was literally speechless. It was, Leo later reflected, the single most satisfying moment of his entire life. I'll call the police, she finally managed. Go ahead, Leo said. I'm sure they'll be thrilled to hear about the mural that's been featured on CNN. Helen turned and stormed away, her clipboard clutched so hard against her chest that Leo was surprised it didn't snap in half. He watched her go, taking another sip of his coffee. It was the best cup of coffee he'd ever had. Helen tried everything. She called the HOA board. She called the police. She called a lawyer. She called the city council. She called anyone who would listen, and some who wouldn't. But every single time she hit the same wall. Leo had broken no laws. Leo had violated no HOA rules. He had all the permits. He had all the approvals. The mural was, by every legal standard, completely beyond reproach. She could feel her power evaporating. For 11 years, she had been the undisputed queen of Fairbrook Estates. And now this quiet artist had exposed her for what she really was. Just another middle-aged woman with a clipboard and too much time on her hands. Her tyranny was over. She thought about moving. But where would she go? Every house she looked at had an HOA. Every neighborhood had someone like her. And everyone knew who she was now. The internet had made sure of that. The last straw came when a reporter from the local news station showed up on her doorstep, microphone in hand, asking for her side of the story. Helen slammed the door in their face. But the damage was done. That night, she sat in her living room, staring at the wall, and for the first time in 11 years, she had no idea what to do. She had spent so long enforcing rules that she had forgotten how to live without them. She had been the queen of the neighborhood, and now her subjects had rebelled. The next morning, Helen Whitmore submitted her resignation as president of the Fairbrook Estates HOA. She didn't give a reason. She didn't need to. Within weeks, she had packed her bags and moved to a retirement community in Florida. A place where, presumably, she could start fresh. A place where no one knew about the mural. But the internet never forgets. And the mural on Leo's garage would remain as a permanent memorial to her reign of terror. The neighborhood celebrated. People who had been afraid of Helen for years suddenly found their courage. They stepped forward to share their own stories of her petty tyranny. The lawn she had fined 3 times in 1 month. The Christmas decorations she had ordered removed. The lemonade stand she had shut down because it didn't have proper signage. They started showing up at Leo's house, not to complain about the mural, but to thank him. To shake his hand. To tell him that he had done what none of them had ever been able to do. One neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, a retired schoolteacher who had lived on Elm Street for 40 years, brought Leo a plate of homemade cookies. "My husband and I have been here since 1982, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. And in all that time, we've never been able to stand up to her. You did. You did what we couldn't do." Another neighbor, a teenager named Marcus, brought over a box of spray paint. "My father always said graffiti was vandalism," he said. "But what you did, that's art. That's real art. Can you teach me?" The party started small, just a few neighbors gathering in Leo's driveway to admire the mural and share stories. But it grew. More people came. Someone brought a grill. Someone else brought music. By the end of the evening, it felt like a block party, except this time, no one had to worry about the HOA president showing up to shut it down. Leo stood on his driveway, watching his neighbors laugh and talk and celebrate. He felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the weather. He had spent so much of his career painting for gallery owners and corporate clients, for people who paid him money to create things they thought would increase their property values. But this was different. This was personal. This was for his neighbors. His community. The news of the mural had spread far beyond Fairbrook Estates. Leo's name was everywhere. He was being interviewed by local reporters, national journalists, even a few international outlets. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. But the attention he got from the general public was nothing compared to the attention he got from the art world. 3 weeks after the mural went viral, Leo received an email from the curator of the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. They wanted to feature the mural in a permanent exhibit on the art of social commentary. The email was polite, professional, and deeply flattering. But it wasn't the only one. A gallery owner from Paris reached out. A collector from Tokyo offered him a 6-figure sum to paint a similar piece on his property. An art magazine wanted to put him on the cover. And then the email that changed everything. It was from a source that Leo had never expected to hear from. A fellow artist. A legend in the graffiti world. Someone who had been doing this since long before Leo had ever picked up a spray can. "I've been watching your work for years," the email read. "The cathedral, the convention center, the gallery shows, they're all beautiful. But this is something else. This is real. This is what art is supposed to be. We need to talk." Leo sat in his studio, staring at the email, and felt his heart pounding in his chest. This was the recognition he had always dreamed of. Not from the galleries or the collectors, but from his peers. From the people who understood what he was trying to do. He had spent so long hiding, so long keeping his two identities separate. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to reveal who he really was. That night, Leo sat down and wrote a response. "I would be honored to talk. And I have a confession to make." The next week, a small gathering was held in a private gallery downtown. It was invitation only, which meant it was filled with the city's art elite. Gallery owners, curators, critics, and collectors. They had been told that there would be a major announcement from a rising star in the art world. They had no idea what they were about to see. Leo stood at the front of the room, wearing a simple black shirt and jeans. He looked calm, but inside, his heart was racing. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "I've been an artist my whole life. I've painted cathedrals and convention centers. I've had shows in Paris, Tokyo, and New York. But I've also had a secret." He paused, letting the tension build. "You all know the mural that went viral last week. The one in Fairbrook Estates. The HOA Karen mural. What you don't know is that it was the latest piece in a much larger body of work." He pressed a button on a remote control, and a massive screen lit up behind him. On it was a slideshow, photographs of his graffiti work. The water towers. The abandoned factories. The bridge supports. All of them signed with a single elegant tag. Spectre. The audience gasped. They knew the name. Everyone in the art world knew the name. Spectre was a legend. An enigma. A ghost who left behind breathtaking murals in the dead of night and vanished before anyone could catch him. And here he was, standing in front of them, revealing himself for the first time. "I'm Spectre," Leo said. "I've been painting graffiti for 15 years. And now I'm done hiding." The reaction was immediate. Journalists scrambled for their phones. Gallery owners started making offers. The crowd surged forward, eager to shake his hand to take a selfie to be part of history. But Leo wasn't done. "I want to make one thing clear," he said, raising his hand. "This isn't about fame. This isn't about money. This is about art. And I'm going to keep making it, whether it's on a gallery wall or a water tower. Because art is everywhere. It's in the walls of our homes and the fences of our neighborhoods. And no one, not the HOA, not the police, not anyone, gets to decide what it is." The crowd erupted in applause. Leo Vasquez became a phenomenon. The HOA Karen mural was immortalized in museums and art books. His identity as Spectre became international news. He was invited to speak at universities, art festivals, and even a TED Talk. But he never forgot where he came from. He still lived in Fairbrook Estates, still waved to his neighbors, still helped Mrs. Patterson carry her groceries. He was still the quiet artist on the cul-de-sac who had shown the whole neighborhood what it meant to stand up to a bully. Helen Whitmore moved to Florida, where, according to the grapevine, she had already joined 2 HOAs and was working on a third. Some things never change. But the mural remained. It was painted over a few years later, after Leo received a commercial offer he couldn't refuse. But it didn't matter. The damage had been done. Helen's reign was over, and the neighborhood was finally free. And every time a resident of Fairbrook Estates passes by Leo's house, they look at that blank wall and smile. They remember the woman with the clipboard and the artist who brought her down. They remember that sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's creation. What do you think? If you were Leo, would you have gone further? Or would you have taken the high road? Let us know in the comments below. And if this story made you smile, please give it a like, subscribe to Revenge Doctrine, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story of justice, karma, and the ultimate power of the underdog. Because sometimes the best weapon you have is a paintbrush.